Welcome to the Cities on the Frontline speaker series on Agile and Adaptive. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Cities on the Frontline speaker series. I am Saurabh Kaidani from Resilient Cities Network. Today's speaker series dwells into the topic of looking at agile and adaptive built environment spaces as the cities and the regions are facing rising issues and challenges due to climate change, and also the demographic challenges where you see maybe the school infrastructure is no longer needed or certain building uses are no longer needed, and how you can leverage these assets for the benefit of the city and to enhance the resilience of the city. The Cities on the Frontline is a virtual thought leadership speaker series featuring solution by cities for cities. The speaker series began in 2020 through a partnership between the Resilient Cities Network and the World Bank Group's City Resilience Program. The series provides city practitioners and the industries and residents that they support with a platform for knowledge exchange. Today's session of Cities on the Frontline speaker series is hosted with gracious support by the GSD, and you will be hearing from Steve Scott, who represents GSD as my co-host, shortly. Before we start, let me remind everyone of the intention of the speaker series and the ground rule for the conversation today. The purpose of this global seminar is to have an open and honest learning conversation. We ask you not to contribute any comment unless you have the personal express permission to do so. We can help you obtain these permissions if needed. We have about 70 registered participants for the call today. So to facilitate the discussion, we ask you to write your questions on the Q&A function of the Zoom. We will also welcome you to introduce yourselves on the chat function and let us know what kind of different participants there are who are listening to this speaker series. Please note that the recording of the session, as well as the summary and the presentation material, will be posted online on our website. I'm happy, as I am repeating myself, I'm happy to co-host the session with Steve Scott from GSD. And over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Saurabh, and equally, I share your excitement, enthusiasm for this session, which I think is going to be great. Just by way of introduction, I'm Stephen Scott. I work for GHD, and I'm our Future Communities leader in the EMEA region. GHD is a global engineering and advisory business, and our commitment is to address the world's biggest challenges in the areas of water, energy, and communities, along with our clients. For us, Future Communities is about creating thriving places and spaces that put people first. We believe that communities are at their best when they're connected, productive, inspired, and resilient, and that finding a balance between these pillars helps deliver for a more sustainable future for our people and our planet. It's great to be here today, partnering with the Resilient Cities Network, and to be working with some like-minded organizations and professionals like the panelists we have today. So I think we've got a really good and exciting session lined up to really talk about the urban and community challenges that we're facing. I think what we're seeing and hearing as professionals from our clients and from our communities is that we're all dealing with so many complex challenges, such as population growth, digital disruption, and obviously the impacts of climate change that we see, increasingly in our day-to-day lives. But these challenges also create opportunities, and I think today we're kind of looking at some of those opportunities. And I think this also, what we're seeing is decision makers are very much committed towards trying to create more sustainable, safe, livable and resilient cities and places for us all. So we recognize those challenges, but I think today is really about, the opportunities. And our guests today have really got some great experiences to bring to the conversation around how we can address some of the challenges that we're facing. We're seeing here so many great examples of how communities are adapting to change despite the challenges, and making a difference and inspiring collaboration across the cities. And the panelists today, have been selected really, or chosen to really kind of help us explore those approaches to adaptive spaces and how we can repurpose parts of our infrastructure and our city fabrics. This subject matter is very close to my heart at a personal level. I believe we're living in very disruptive times, driven by a number of the key drivers that we talked about: climate change, the geopolitical uncertainty. I think rapid technological change is creating a huge amount of challenges in our cities and in our communities. Our urban spaces are kind of at the forefront, I believe, of these dynamic changes resulting from these drivers, directly impacting demographics, and these various drivers are coming together and compounding. I think some of the issues that we're facing, and also really need to be kind of considered together when we're thinking about our solutions. I think we really need to evolve our cities to face the future. I think we need to do things differently. We need to seek out new solutions. And when I say that, I think, that's not only in how we approach projects, the project solutions themselves, but how we actually kind of go through the investment decision-making process. We need to face the future with this kind of sense of optimism and new purpose, I think. And really think about, how we can bring agility and longevity into our cities so that future generations are considered from the outset, and that multi-purpose spaces can help us really promote connectivity, productivity, and a sense of place and a sense of community within our cities. So today we're going to discuss resiliency, we're going to discuss agility and flexibility in our open spaces, and draw on some global examples and experiences of multi-purpose spaces, the reuse of assets and infrastructure, and offering valuable lessons, hopefully, for the audience today about how we, some of the things we can do to help build resilient cities for the future. And as I said at the start, we've got some great guests, and I'll briefly introduce them before kind of launching into the session. First of all, we have Matt Davis from the Institute of Place Management, a good friend and partner of GHD, so welcome, Matt. Institute of Place Management are working strategically, looking at placemaking initiatives across the UK to really improve the prosperities of our towns and our urban spaces. And Matt and the Institute are also currently the programme managers of the High Street Task Force here in the UK. Delighted to welcome Kate Picker from the National Trust here in the UK, who is the Operations and Experiences Manager at the Castlefield Viaduct in Manchester. Really interesting project, greening a disused railway viaduct, which I had the privilege and the pleasure to visit last year. So I'm looking forward to hearing much more about that. And also Sazlin Sabri from Think City in Malaysia. Welcome. Think City is an impact organisation creating sustainable and equitable places for community benefit. And Sazlin's going to bring a number of experiences from Malaysia in terms of how cities are being repurposed and being reused down there. So welcome everyone, and looking forward to the next sort of 50 minutes or so in terms of discussion. What I'd like to do is open up really with a question for you all. and then and invite you to kind of just give us an initial response to that one by one. And the question is this, that you're all involved in sort of projects and programs around adaptation, around repurposing of infrastructure and places. So I'm interested from each one of your perspectives, if you could give us a quick overview of some of the kind of key challenges you're observing or you're facing in delivering change. And importantly, I think, some indication or some thoughts around, the ingredients for success that you've found, anything particular in your project or your project approach that is really supportive of, creating adaptive and agile spaces. So maybe Matt, first over to you to give us a bit of a broader perspective from the UK, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Thanks very much for the introduction. Hope you can all hear me okay. I'm just going to share some slides with you and just take you through a very quick run through of some examples. So this is a big topic, and I thought I would give 2 examples of places from here in the UK and sandwich a quick bit of theory in between both of these. This is Whitechapel Road in London. The building you can see was built in 1752 as a hospital on the right-hand side, the London Infirmary. You can see that that's the Golden Jubilee of Queen Victoria, going past the hospital. But today, on the left-hand side, this building is now the town hall. So it stood the test of time. It was £125 million, I think, to refurbish this. But from a hospital, now we have a town hall that's full of services for the community. There's a residence hub. You can go, the job centre is there. All of the council services essentially are inside this building. So I know we're talking about flexibility and adaptability, but this is, this is a 250-year span, but look what we can do to repurpose buildings. 2 things to say about this. The first thing is that this building was protected, so it was it was listed, so it couldn't have been pulled down. So we have something to work with. But the second thing is that, this building is right opposite the new Elizabeth tube line in London. It goes across London. That carries 200 million passengers a year. And you can't just bring millions of people to a high street and to one building asset and just hope that it's going to make a place. Now, it's a fantastic building. On the right, you can see the sort of, as it was as a hospital, it was just left derelict. And on the left, this is the space as it is now. I was there last week. But outside the building, when you bring people to a high street, there's lots of tiny elements, and these are the market stalls. This is a trial here to make sure that the stalls can be effectively used by traders, that they've got spaces to store things, that people have got areas to sit. So there's a lesson here. It's not just about gleaming, expensive, huge buildings. It's also about how they're embedded in the streetscape and all of the myriad different things that go together to make a place. So one quick example, and we looked at research here about what are the factors that create vital and viable places. So vital in terms of people want to use them, and viable sort of financially. And there are 237 that we found in research. So we've got to make sense of this. Clearly, you're sitting there thinking, right, what is it? Is it the market stalls in my location? Every location is unique. So you need a bit of a framework of how to think about agile and effective places. So we rank these factors, and we share this quite a lot in terms of how much influence do they have on the vitality and viability of the high street, but then crucially, how much control do you have over them as practitioners, as people managing spaces? This is what it looks like when you map that many on a matrix, controllability on the y-axis and the influence on the x-axis. So down here, don't have much impact, forget about it. Down here, have a lot of impact, but you can't change them. You can't change where your place is. You can't pick up your city and move it somewhere else. So you're going to have to live with those. And on the top left, it's not really worth it. Yes, they do have an impact, but you're going to have to do a lot to change these factors. So the crucial sectors in the top right here, get on with these things. These really impact how places work. And here you can see what those factors are. And we're sharing the slides afterwards, but here's the list in order. So there's some real key things here. Activity in the top left is number one, and we'll talk about post-COVID shortly. But look, if you've done all the work to bring people to your location, you've got a gleaming transport system, etc., but somebody walks down your high street and nowhere is open, or there is not the offer, for example, that they want to take part in, then really you've failed at one of the first hurdles. That's just one item, and I suppose hopefully this list is a good, literally a checklist for people to understand, have we got the elements in place? And one of these things can bring your place down. So I know we're talking about the physical environment here, built environment and spaces, but really they will live or die on some of these factors as well. You know, we talk a lot about safety and crime in the UK at the moment, and clearly I'm not going to go to the gleaming Whitechapel Town Hall if I don't feel safe doing so. So really useful list, we think, to base from. I've got about a minute left, so I just want to end with one more example and a bit of a call to action. Here's the second example, and again, there's a bit of a theme here, is making use of older buildings. This is Bristol in the southwest of England. This is a store you may well have heard of, Marks and Spencer, a sort of iconic British brand. Wonderful what the high street used to look like, and still does in many areas of the UK. This is from the 1960s. But bricks and mortar retail has been declining in our country. And this raises the big question, because this store is the heart of the high street of the community in the 60s, where people would go for lots of different things. Yes, it was retail, but it's also a meeting point. It's also about, the community's esteem. Today, this is called Sparks Bristol, and it brands itself as a department store with a difference. And on the right-hand side, you can see the event list. I've just taken what's on today and tomorrow. It brings together lots of different community organisations and charities, makers, interesting people, and it gives them a space. And the crucial thing is, this isn't really about the built environment. This is about partnership. This is saying we aren't going to get one corporation to take over this quite expensive, large department store. And so we have an organisation called Art Space Life Space, who specialise in bringing community and arts organisations onto high streets. We have Marks and Spencer's, the previous tenant, if you like, working with the council to say, how can we get some new uses in here and make sure this continues to be a hub for the community in quite a different way. So just to finish, what the challenge is for us is there are 2,745 high streets in England. So we're not going to get change by putting money in. It's a massive, massive challenge. What we really need is partnership. Over 4 in 10 towns in the UK have no evidence of these kind of partnerships, the likes of which create something like Sparks in Bristol. So this is a call to action. If you don't have a place partnership, and many of you will have, but how are you going to bring those different uses, perspectives, skill sets together? And the background of this slide, to leave you on one, is a place called Barnsley in England. We now have NHS health diagnostic services right next to bricks and mortar retail in our centres. This is one example. So you can go and have a screening for different types of health conditions, meet with clinical practitioners, and you can literally walk 10 metres and you will be in a cafe, you will be in a retailer. So you're right in the heart of the high street. Those things, those new innovative uses only happen with partnerships, and that's something we're really championing at the moment. So Steve, that was really quick and slightly artificial as I'm going through slides, but hopefully useful. And thank you. Any questions we can pick up in the session.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. That was really good. And for those that are not super aware, with Marks and Spencer's, they're also called Marks and Sparks. So that link into Sparks Hub is very, very appropriate. Kate, can I turn to you? Same question, but I guess having seen some of the theory, if you like, that Matt put up alongside some examples, I guess what you're involved in is a real live example and delivering a project. So really interested to hear kind of your take on the question and bring the Castlefield Viaduct into that equation, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I have my presentation, please?
There we go.
Lovely, thank you.
Oh, it's gone again.
I'll start talking and hope that it'll pop up in the
Yeah,
background.
there you go.
Oh, there it is. There we go.
Technology.
So this is Castlefield Viaduct. It's the kind of main bridge going across the top of the picture there. And just a bit of background on the National Trust. We're an independent charity, so we are not government funded. We were formed over 125 years ago at the end of the Industrial Revolution. And our purpose is to deliver benefit to the nation through history, nature and beauty. And what we do is we're a conservation charity, but we call it Conservation for Access. And we look after both landscape, coastline and historic buildings. But we also have an urban places strategy. And this is around addressing unequal access to nature, beauty and history where people live, an acknowledgement of the fact that I think it's something like over 80% of people in the UK live in urban spaces, and that is expected to continue to rise. It could be as much as 90% by 2030. So we do feel that there's a lot of need in the urban space for our charitable purpose. Next slide, please. So this is a line drawing of the viaduct. It's predominantly a wrought iron steel and is around 330 metres in length, comprising of 8 spans. And it is a grade 2 listed viaduct. So again, its survival is around being listed and being something that we have to continue to care for. Next slide, please. So Central Station in Manchester was closed in 1969, as was the viaduct at the same time as one of the primary lines into that station. It fell into disuse and the tracks were later dismantled and removed. The viaduct has been left derelict ever since. It has had no use, and the occasional clearing of vegetation to prevent structural damage. It belongs to Department for Transport, so they do care and maintain for the structure, but it has otherwise been unused. Next slide, please. So in 2021 and 2022, we started to look at putting something on the structure. This very much came out of conversations initially with Castlefield Forum, who are a kind of local, primarily a residents and other interested parties group who've wanted something on the viaduct for a long time. And then with the support of Manchester City Council, we were able to gain the permissions, and Highways England as well, and the Department for Transport, who gave us access and leased the space to us for a period of time. We were able to appoint design companies and construct the viaduct. And this is just some of the examples of one of the challenges, which is how do you build something on a bridge with only one entrance and exit that is quite high up in the air. So construction was an interesting one. It also has no services, so there was no running water to sites, and we had to electricity, things like that. So there was all the things around infrastructure as well as access. Fortunately, there is vehicle access to the entrance of it through a car park that is owned by Transport for Greater Manchester and leased to Manchester Central, and they've both been very, very kind and supportive in their access as well. So just reflecting on what Matthew was saying, partnership has been key to all of this work. Next slide, please. So as I said, the challenges were adding to a large infrastructure, adding services such as power and water supply. There was a delay in opening. We ended up opening before some things had finished due to those kind of additional construction challenges. We actually also planted during the period where the UK went over 40 to sort of high 30s into 40 degrees for the first time. So that was quite a challenge. Happened to be planting during that period, which was a very difficult time to be planting up a garden. We've had challenges around irrigation. So as part of our sustainability criteria, the aim was that we would use entirely rainwater capture. Unfortunately, and again, probably as a bit of a result of climate change too, with these slightly hotter, drier summers that we're getting in the UK, we don't have sufficient rainwater, even in Manchester, which is notorious in the UK for being quite a rainy city. It's not sufficient during hot weather, so we had to put in a pump irrigation system to allow the planting to flower. Operational challenges of this new temporary structure with a single entrance exit currently. We have a site limit of 50 people, 50 visitors on site, plus our staff and volunteer team. So we have to manage capacity. And just we've never, as an organisation, operated a garden on a bridge before. Very few people have. So just working out how that goes and how that can run. Staffing resource, again, because we weren't quite sure. We'd never done it before, getting the staffing levels right. And then, as I said, those restricted visitor numbers have proved some of the challenges of the site. Next slide, please. But we did meet all those challenges. This is the viaduct shortly after opening with our Director General on the bridge there, and we managed to achieve this beautiful garden within this industrial space. Next slide, please. And we did a lot of feedback, because one of the things we wanted from this pilot was to understand what the people of Manchester and other people that were visiting wanted from the structure. Resoundingly, they want to see it stay and be a permanent feature of the city. Within the just under 2 years that we've been open, we've had over 100,000 visitors now to the site, which, given our capacity restriction, is significant. And we also found that 1 in 5 Manchester residents gained interest in engaging with heritage from that. So we had a lot of feedback around heritage being key. 73% of Manchester residents felt proud of Castlefield and its heritage after visiting the viaduct, so that sense of kind of place and placemaking. And 8 out of 10 residents feel it belongs to them and their community, which was really important to us as well. Next slide, please. So the future for this, we would like to make it permanent, and we will need to achieve significant external funding in order to be able to do that. But there is an ambition for a 1 kilometre sky park, so the idea that we would carry on down the bridge and create another entrance exit at the far end, potentially running alongside the Metrolink tram line for a time, if that's possible, to create a through route. It will be around community use and programming, and we have a lot of community partners. We have plot partners, other partners that have garden space up on the bridge now, and we'd like to continue with that. Would allow us to connect to Salford and Trafford, so connecting to the other boroughs of Greater Manchester, and we think it could achieve up to 1 million visitors a year. And we've done this through consultation, so the design that has been created has been done as a result of the feedback and consultation that we've received from the people of Manchester and around. And a decision will be coming in the next couple of months while we seek investment from mixed sources. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. So many questions in my head, but can't really go into them now. But 2 things that did strike me, and I guess it builds on Matt's presentation as well. I hadn't appreciated the stakeholders mapping that you had to do and involvement. Knew there'd be some, but some of the ones you mentioned, I was like, wow, that's a huge task. And then there's that link to listed and protection as well that Matt talked about with that project. And I guess Sazlin, sort of moving to you with the same sort of question. I'm assuming that sort of stakeholder link, that kind of heritage and protection link is going to be important was important in a lot of things that you're doing at Think City in Malaysia as well. So be interested to hear that kind of juxtaposition, if you like, between the UK and Malaysia. So over to you, Sazlin.
Thank you very much, Steve. Good afternoon and good morning as well to everyone. Let me quickly share my screen. Sorry. I hope you can see my screen now. Okay. So yeah, thank you very much, Steve, again. To respond to your questions earlier, I would like to give an example of one of our earliest projects in Georgetown, Penang. We have this piece of land located right in the middle of World Heritage Sites, Georgetown. And before we came in with our new intervention, this space was a flea market, illegal ones, dominated not by the local communities, but outsiders and immigrants who came here to sell their stuff, etc. And there was a bit of, hanky-panky going on there as well, etc., etc. So this situation in this space definitely gave a very negative impression and perception to the locals that this space is not safe. I don't belong here. There's no sense of ownership at all. And there were so many issues from there in the space, from social aspect, environmentally, and to the extent that the value of the space, I would say, was disregarded with this kind of activities happening on site. Then Think City came with a proposal to transform this into this. So it's a very simple park. It's a neighborhood park created for the usage of the local, and it was designed in such a way that it won't overshadow the significant architectural characteristics of the historical buildings surrounding the park. In terms of timeline, it took us about 3 years to plan and implement the project. And throughout the 3 years, we encountered so many challenges and hiccups. And one of them is, getting the buy-in from the local community to implement the park. So people first approach has been our main approach in the process, where we did so many engagements and consultation with the stakeholders, including the local community in that area. Back and forth, it took us about 1 year to get the buy-in, but I would say it was a worthwhile sweat and tears and journey. Series of community engagements were done through public surveys, exhibitions, FGDs, workshop, town hall sessions, and any way possible to reach the audience we need. And after the project completed, the ambience, the surroundings, the vibe of the space transformed, and more locals are using the spaces, and that of course invites more visitors and tourists as well to use the space. Our engagement did not stop there. We continued with the post-construction survey to know whether or not issues before the spaces was transformed, resolved, and whether or not the project really give an impactful to the surrounding community. Let me quickly share a little diagram. This is one of my favorite diagram. Shows how we operate at various project scales, from neighborhood planning, precinct planning, to strategic master planning, and so on. And then our approach is definitely evidence-based approach inspired by innovation for transformative results. And we are a neutral platform where we work very closely with the community, with public agencies, government agencies, and also private entities as well. And community involvement or community participation is always part of our process, strategically centered around the project's needs and demands, with each having its own targeted tactic and approach conducted at various stages and intervals. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Sazin. That's really interesting. I think, again, some common themes starting to come through. Surab, I think you've got some questions to kind of lead in with, and then we'll open up to the wider chat.
Sure. Thank you, Steve. I think I've been inspired by all of your projects, Matthew, Kate, and Sazleen. I think this has been a great learning. My first set of questions will be both to Kate and Sazleen, and that will be related to your both of your projects really are anchored into historical and cultural aspect. So how can we strike a balance between preserving these value of heritage, heritage in infrastructure, heritage of buildings, while also ensuring that we are building an adaptive and resilient asset, considering future challenges? So maybe first you, Kate, and then you can pass it on to Sazleen.
So as I said, the Trust as an Org National Trust as a charity looks after a lot of historic buildings, historic spaces, cultural spaces, landscapes, coastline, and I think the feeling very much strongly in the organisation is that resilience to climate change is key, and if we don't adapt our spaces to climate change, then they won't be resilient and they won't survive. And part of our purpose is to conserve these spaces in perpetuity as far as we can. So we do see adaptability and sustainability as core to what we do, and we kind of work more broadly on that as an organisation as well, from everything from reduction in landscape flooding to energy sources, and we've published a climate for change adaptation in the National Trust as well as an organisation, so that it's really core to us. In terms of the viaduct, everything that we've put onto the viaduct can be removed and it can be returned to its original state. That was part of our planning permission, and part of being on there as a heritage listed building. So when we put the garden onto the infrastructure, we did it in a way that it could be removed. I'm hoping we don't have to do that and that we can keep it, but it could be removed to preserve that structure. And then we work a lot, it's not our structure, so Historic Railways through the Department for Transport do a lot of the overall care of the structure that remains with them, but we have to make sure that we're not impactful on it. Nothing is attached to it. All of our and we had a lot of work, and we worked with 12 and a company called Arup around fire protection and weight distribution as well, to ensure that we're not overloading any of the space and causing kind of any pressure on the structure. And then in terms of adaptability, we fully compost on site. Our garden has been really hot on sustainability. We are a peat-free organisation. We have been for a long time. We were one of the kind of early adapters of peat-free. So none of our planting is grown in peat, and we don't have any peat soil on site. And like I say, we try as much as possible to water using rainwater. We only turn the irrigation system on when we are out of water in our rainwater collection tanks, and they collect water from the building that's on the structure. So we've really tried to embed that within it and ensure that we not only don't damage the historic structure, but also that more widely as an organisation, we're taking whatever action we can to try and preserve all of our structures, and that can sometimes be even on a landscape scale. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. Cezlyn, over to you to speak about the Penang's approach.
Yeah, I think first thing first, I think we need to know and understand three things. What are we dealing with? Who are we dealing with, and how we're dealing with it? So what are we dealing with? For example, if I'm not using the park just now as a reference point, but in general, for example, if we're dealing with heritage buildings, we need to understand what is the value, or what are the values or significance of the building, and then that is one. And then secondly, what are the needs, the current needs, and current trends, and also future needs and future trends, in order for us to understand better what to propose. And then how dealing with, I think there's a lot of ways. So main important thing is we must know what values in that space we want to keep and enhance, what additional values we want to create in that space, and make it sustainable, future-proof through design strategies, selection of materials, creation of content, so that we can extend the life of the space and provide significant social and economic benefits to the society. Another important approach is, of course, from my presentation earlier, community participation and collaboration with stakeholders and all potential partners, because involving these parties in the planning and decision-making process can help ensure that development projects are sensitive to their needs and priorities. And community engagements also provides a forum for residents or stakeholders to voice their concerns and aspirations for their neighborhoods, which can help guide development a more sustainable and equitable way. Series of community engagements or sessions can be done through public surveys, exhibitions, SGDs. There are so many possible ways to reach the audience we need. So in short, holistic approach and strategy, and active participation of communities and stakeholders is very, very important. We may know a lot about the technical aspects, but they know better about the space and the place. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kate and Cezlyn. And I can really see from your presentation those aspects of community stakeholder engagement and wider stakeholder engagement. And it's very hard to achieve these adaptive reuse. Also should lead to building of community resilience is a good co-benefit. which leads to, I think, Matthew, to you, and that has stuck the image in your presentation really stuck me, where you also thought of maybe how the community was perceiving some of the space around the asset itself. And maybe can you briefly talk about how has your work on the high street now are changing the retail, responded to the challenging retail landscape and impact after the COVID-19? And how has the footfall been after COVID-19? And what has been the result so far? And how you see this evolving in future trends?
Yeah, sure. That's one of the big questions at the moment. So just reflecting on the UK, although I think these trends are quite shared internationally. So in terms of the retail landscape post-COVID, I mean, at the height, clearly when people were locked down or not going out, I think we were up to nearly 40% of retail in the UK was done online. So that's a fundamental challenge to actually just going out to physical spaces and to high streets. We're back down to about 25 to 30%. But what that's meant is, if we look at the last full year of figures, footfall on UK high streets is down by about 15 to 17%. So that's a huge shift. And how we're coping with that, I mean, the reason why I shared the town hall in Whitechapel, it's a great example, and the department store, because there are some spaces on our high streets now which are legacy and which, quite frankly, are too large for one organisation to take on and to invest in. If you think from a pure business perspective, which of course we need, this isn't all about state intervention and state funding. Who is going to line up to take on a very expensive aging asset on a high street where the footfall is falling? It just doesn't make business sense. So what we're seeing is, and I can give other examples, is breaking up these buildings into smaller spaces, thinking about innovative mixes of the third sector, of charities, of people with different revenue and funding streams. But even more fundamentally across the UK, we've got examples of, for example, the government itself is starting to build campuses outside of Westminster. So we've got significant developments in Darlington, for example, and in Stoke-on-Trent, which are two regional centres in the UK. So there's a little bit of a reconception of who is going to invest where, which we all need to do. Sazleen spoke to this as well. And the second thing, just to highlight, that engagement piece is really important, because we've all become, certainly in the classes of people who are going to office jobs in cities, for example, or reliant on those kind of patterns, we've all become a lot more attuned to our habits. We're perhaps working a bit from home more often in the UK. That's certainly a trend. And so we really need to listen to people who are using places, because if we don't, we're going to run into the same challenge where we hit those changes in behaviour. Okay, a pandemic is quite a unique experience. We perhaps should have been better prepared and had more sight of that. But even just in terms of trends of what people want to do in centres, we have to listen continuously. And last thing to say is, not just when we want to build something new. That conversation of what would you like in this space is quite a sterile, artificial conversation. You've got to be much better at tracking what are people actually doing day by day, week by week, month by month. And London is very good at this. They have a data store that the Greater London Authority runs that all of their boroughs can tap into, look at mobility, look at where people are spending their time, for example, and lots of different things, deprivation as well. That's really the challenge for the rest of the UK. And I would say for Europe is we need that kind of data and that kind of thinking, but outside of the capital cities and the typical sort of centres of power, if you like. We'll leave it as a big question. I'll leave it there. Perhaps other people will want to come in on that one.
Sure. I certainly the footfalls and maybe how the younger generations will behave compared to us or the older generations, it will also be a changing trend in this area. Steve, there are some great, amazing questions by the participants in the Q&A and some on chat. So please go ahead.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions in the chat, but I mean, just picking up one of Matt's points, which I don't really want to to let kind of drift past around sort of that data-led approach, if you like. And I think it applies to high streets and a whole range of infrastructure, that we're now in a very different landscape in terms of data availability. And I think the agility of data gives us agility in our solution making as well. And it's certainly something that at GHD we're kind of working more and more in, and you know, hopefully doing some stuff with Matt and the team as well. But that data evidence-led approach, I think, is critical going forward. But looking at the questions in the chat that have been raised, there's a question from Andrew Sharman, and it's around stakeholders, and I think it was probably prompted by all of the panelists' introductions there. And it's how easy was it to get stakeholders involved in projects, in sort of projects that we were talking about, and what was the learning from managing community, I guess, you know, and their feelings around the reuse of heritage assets. So kind of a double-headed question: stakeholders in general, but then community and heritage linked together. Maybe Kate, if you kind of give a perspective on that, because your outline of the project kind of raised my kind of query around that as well.
Yeah, there are a number of stakeholders in the area. I wasn't involved with the project at its conception from that kind of initial contact with the stakeholders, but we certainly, just from where we sit geographically to the south of the city, we're surrounded by other landowners, other businesses, so we couldn't have done any of it without support from the council, from Transport for Greater Manchester. We're sit next to them. The other bridge next to ours is still the Metrolink bridge. It's actually an older viaduct than our one, but it's the one that the trams still run on. Historic Railways, Department for Transport letting us on there in the first place, and the Forum and their heavy involvement there. We actually have a member of Castlefield Forum on our project board, so that we have that kind of community involvement embedded right into at board level. Sorry, what was the second part of the question?
It was around, I guess, communities' involvement in the heritage aspect. You know, you're reusing a heritage asset there, and I guess it's the protection, it's the sentiment, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was an advantage to us that it was disused. So we weren't. It wasn't. It was a change of use, but not from something that was already being kind of worked on and loved. I think people have been passing it on the Metrolink system for years, looking out the window and seeing it empty and kind of considering what it could be. So I think that was we weren't creating a change of space that people were already utilizing. So I think therefore the response from the community was positive, and the forum really wanted it to have some life and to bring this asset to life for their community. So I do think that was helpful. We've worked in partnership even onto the viaduct as well. We work with a lot of community partners, and just one thing for us really was to gain that feedback as well. So from everybody that visited, and then we did where we had underrepresented groups, we did do some further offsite research, really to feed into the future design, so that we were taking on board the opinions of as many people as possible, and then able to incorporate that into what the future might look like. So it is a phased project. And we are temporary site at the moment, so the purpose of being up there was to gain that kind of community input and feedback.
Yeah, thank you. And Matt Saslin, any sort of observations around the importance of that stakeholder engagement, community engagement? It kind of came through, I think, in both your intros. So Saslin, maybe?
Yeah, for me, from based on my experience working with community engagement, participation, and participation with stakeholders as well is very, very important, because it allows them to have a say, because we want them to know that they are part of the process, and it has to be, their participation has to be from the very beginning of the process. It cannot be like towards the end, and then it has to be consistently conducted. It cannot be a one-off engagement at different phases, at different intervals. Yeah.
Okay. Surab.
Sure. Yep. Steve? There were, I think, a couple of other questions I will specifically ask. I think I will try to combine the rest of the two, and it was related to water. And I think, Kate, it is coming to you and Saslina specifically in terms of water aspects. So when it comes to the viaduct project, the question was when it came to the viaduct project, were any specific experience or expertise when it comes to water were leveraged, or maybe in terms of water solutions? And in terms of even parks, Aslin, was there a water management strategy which was put in place for the park, maybe to leverage a co-benefit in a case of extreme rainfall event? It's not leading to a flash flood kind of a situation by maybe, let's say, increasing the paved surface. So first, maybe over to Kate, and then to you, Cecily.
Yeah, so I think we did know going in that it would be primarily container planting due to the fact that we were building onto a disused viaduct. There's no soil, it's very thin on there, so we were always going to have to put our planting into containers. So I think that was considered, and the types of plants were considered as well. I wasn't involved in the beginning of the project. I came on board later to manage the operation, so I don't actually know exactly what our water strategy was there. But as an organisation, we do have some expertise in that area. So although, like I say, we did find that we were having to, we did have to put in an irrigation system. We weren't quite able to capture enough rainwater from our, I think probably because we've only got quite a small building on there due to weight restriction and the size of the space. So our rainwater capture works most of the year, but not in the really hot season. So we did have to add the irrigation system, which is just a series of pipes that irrigate direct into the planters. But I think there was some consideration given to the types of planting that we used as well.
As for the park, so far we haven't encountered any issues related to water ponding or flooding in that area. But a couple of years back, we did some improvement work to one area that is in close vicinity to that park, where we help with the flooding and water ponding issues. And now, so far, everything is fine. There's no issue encountered so far.
Thank you. Thank you. There was a quick question if I wanted to cover, was related to creating, how do you create a place, of how do you create legibility or the identity of this place, of how do you recreate the identity of the place? And maybe that's something goes to Matthew's point, but before it was maybe a very important landmark of the city, and always this is the hospital to be. And how do you change that perception and the identity of a space? It can be in any aspect. It's an open question. Any one of you can go first.
Just very quickly, just in relevance to the example then that I gave, I think you really got to ask who you're talking about, which stakeholder are you referring to, because all of us have a completely different conception of the identity of the same place. I mean, I'm quite a boring individual that works in the place industry. So when I walk opposite that building, I immediately look up and I think, wow, look at this amazing heritage landmark. Thank goodness we protected it, and look what we've done with it. But equally, that's not the right perspective. There's no right here. There's thousands of people that use that road every single day in the market to just buy their essentials, to trade, to meet people, and so on. So the identity for them is in that mobility and in that ability to meet people, to do things, to sit down, to have a coffee, to have the freedom to sort of trade, if you like. So I think it comes back to the previous question on engagement. You really have to ask who are you asking that of? And of course, the last thing to say that the danger is in Whitechapel, but this is also of state engagement, is you create an amazing transport system and amazing buildings, but you don't ask that question of, well, how do local people, how do communities, how are they going to view this? Because it doesn't automatically create a place. You end up with these white elephants if you don't think how they're embedded in. The last thing, because this is really practical, is shout out to the town centre manager in Whitechapel, a lady called Bridget Galloway. Her whole job is to convene with the community and ask them, how are you using that? What would you like to see? When do you want to come in and use this asset? What's causing you an issue? What do you like? And she's brilliant at it. She's a brilliant communicator. And we're never going to get away from those kind of positions and that kind of conversation that needs to be ongoing. And from that, you know, there's no magic in it. You start to understand, right, this is how people view the area. These are the things that need fixing. And it would be quite surprising. I don't think Whitechapel would mind me saying, you know, I stayed in a hotel, I saw some rats on the high street, and if you were coming in as a tourist, you'd be thinking, are they going to fix the rat problem? But actually, is it an issue in the priority of the 50 different things that might need to happen in an area? You know, there's lots of rats in London. It's just a fact. So you really have to drill into who you're asking and what their perspectives really.
I just saw pop up in the chat from Andrew that Bridget's an absolute legend. So, but it kind of was aligning to a little bit to what I was kind of thinking myself, that, you know, behind I think all these projects and so many projects where you're looking at kind of community involvement, you're looking at sort of heritage or reuse, repurposing. It needs that champion, and whether that champion is an individual or an organization, it needs that sort of passion and enthusiasm to get the stakeholders together and to get the thing moving. I was also quite touched by something you said, Kate, around, you know, we want to become a kilometre in the sky, and that put me in mind of, you know, a very successful project. You know, but why is it so difficult then to make the case for that next step? What is it that we are doing, or what do we need to do differently, if you like, in our decision making, our investment case? You know, the ability to get funding together for projects like this to happen, because, you know, they're all presenting clear community benefit, clear heritage benefit. But if you're then struggling to get money for the next phase, you kind of think, we're not quite doing something right. I don't know if any of you got a sort of perception around that, the difficulty of funding and how we need to appraise these things in a slightly different lens. Matt,
I mean, sorry.
Okay, go on, Kate.
I think the funding landscape's quite interesting at the moment in the UK.
Yeah.
I think there are some challenges maybe that we have currently that perhaps weren't there certainly a few years ago, maybe pre-COVID. And I think some of it's around mixed sources of funding. I know we're approaching a number of potential different elements. So there's public funding, but there's also corporate funding, private funding, those kind of things. You have to be quite mindful of who you are working with. I think, and we're very conscious of that as an organisation. But I think mixed funding seems to be potential. But yeah, it's. I think there's a bit of an interesting landscape at the moment in that area.
Yeah. And Sasim, would you sort of agree from your perspective? You know, how easy is it to get these projects started from an investment point of view?
Honestly, it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. But yeah, for me, collaboration is very much important. And then what we usually want in some of our projects, what we try to implement is try to promote a co-funding or co-investment to a project, so that basically try to make sure that we're going to get a win-win situation for both parties that involved in the projects. That is one of the way that we already implementing through our projects.
Yeah, thank you. And listen, I'm conscious of time, and we're right up against the hour, so I think we'll leave it there. Certainly from my perspective, we could go on discussing this for another half an hour or more. So I'd like to thank you all for your contribution. I found it very interesting myself, and let's keep these discussions going. Surab, maybe over to you for the concluding remark.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. I think, firstly, I would like to thank GHD to open for this collaboration and co-hosting the session with us. I really enjoyed learning from all of the panelists. Thank you, Sazleen. Next time when I'm in Penang, I'm going to say hello to you. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Matthew. I have no plans right now to visit to UK, but whenever I am, I will drop you a note. It was very good to have your perspective at the projects which you have presented, and I'm sure the participants would have loved hearing your thoughts as well. For all the participants, watch our website for the session's recording and summary. Also, stay tuned for our next session, which is on extreme heat, which will be addressing on extreme heat on 25th of April. And the keynote for this session will be by the Deputy Mayor of the City of Paris. Thank you.